Hello and welcome again to another episode of HR in Review podcast with me, your host, Verity Goff. Today I am being joined by Chris Robinson. He is a Senior L&D and Culture Manager at Octopus Electric Vehicles, Octopus EV. I've got a really interesting little bio. I'm going to read about him shortly. Just to explain, we're going to be talking about skills today, future skills and the challenges that are lying ahead for HR and L&D people. There's obviously a skills deficit, and we really want to just get down to brass tacks here and find out what it is businesses need to do now to stay ahead. So, Chris, welcome. I've got this little intro. I'm going to just read it out, and then if there's anything I've missed, you feel free to add, if that's okay. So, Chris, I've got here, you'll probably recognise Chris from the 2005 Under-12s Wellington Regional Speech Competition. Yes. But he was also a semi-professional New Zealand underwater hockey player. Well, impressive. These days, he's settled down from those illustrious heights, and he's working as the Senior L&D and Culture Manager at Octopus EV, going to battle with climate change one electric vehicle at a time. That's probably the most exciting bio I've had to read in quite a while, so thanks, Chris. Welcome, and is there anything I may have missed from that wonderful intro?
That's dead on. You've obviously done your research, Verity, and I appreciate that.
I have indeed. Okay, well, we'll jump into the subject today. Obviously, L&D is your thing. That's what you're working on at the moment. And it's that, sort of elephant in the room, isn't it? Everybody's talking about skills deficit, looking at, the facts. People are saying, by 2030, we're going to have so many jobs that are needed to be filled and what have you. So at the moment, what would you say the kind of state of play is and what's driving the shortage? I know it's quite broad, but what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, if we're talking, I guess, maybe a macro shortage, it's probably in that kind of the tech area of like AI, data, software development, things like that. I think there's been a reduction, over the last maybe say like 2 decades, there's probably been a bit of there's been a time of surplus, if that makes sense, where people are maybe talent and hiring managers are more so looking for I guess people who fit the bill straight away rather than looking to develop talent in-house. And then you combine that with the exponential rise of technology. And I think those kind of older, more maybe, archaic ways of trying to hire and trying to manage your talent aren't really working with the rate of pace. And then you've got other countries who are more so, I guess, out of necessity rather than anything else, and I guess a hunger. They are investing in those areas, and individuals in those countries are investing in those areas because that's how they're going to get by. That's how they're going to survive. And so in the UK, I think we've got a lot of choice and there's a lot of comfort, but other countries are probably getting ahead because they need to, and this is the way that they can get their competitive advantage now that the world has opened up so much more and we're less of a kind of commodity economies and things like that. It's moving digital a lot faster, which obviously has been democratized so much more in the last kind of 10, 15 years.
Well, you see, I was going to ask about, specific skills that are needed, but when people give a time frame, they say, in the next 10 years, next 5 years. But I'm scrapping that and I'm going to say in the next 2 to 3 years, what can you see are going to be the skills within your workplace that you're going to be right, we definitely need people coming in who have these skills? What would you say they are?
To be honest with you, there's definitely a huge piece on what the future looks like in future skills, but also let's not lose sight of the fact that there are lots of skills that were developed decades ago that we still haven't quite nailed yet. So if we could, for instance, the concept of feedback came around in the 1950s, and I think we still probably need to work, especially in British and New Zealand culture as well, how to actually deliver effective feedback. But yes, there are future skills that we need, but also let's not think that we've kind of mastered all the skills that we needed 12 months ago or over the last kind of 10 years. I would say influence is probably going to be a huge one. I think as we move more remote, and again, there's a lot of return to the office, but I think the pendulum's probably going to swing back a bit, and there's probably going to be a middle ground. And regardless of how much you're in the office, I think the art of influence and the art of, I guess, like being present for as like a manager is going to be super important. Probably in, I would say in like the next 12 months. And I guess for like individuals and for individual contributors, I guess, AI is the buzzword at the moment. And if you look at like, say, like Duolingo, has like just come out recently with their kind of AI first mentality, and it's backfired a bit for them. But if we can see that as maybe like the one extreme, like your workplace might be somewhere along that spectrum of looking at the roles that they have and kind of trying to justify them, if that makes sense. So for people's own sake, I would say like commercial awareness is probably a big one. Actually understanding how the business works, where the money's going, and where they're actually adding value. Um, but I'd love to hear like your thoughts on that, Verity.
Because you must have mentioned Duolingo, and I use Duolingo. I'm learning Spanish and Arabic at the moment with it, and yes, I've noticed it's AI, and I'm noticing, the AI thing everywhere. And I mean, that's a learning tool that I use. Why is it backfired? I mean, I'm interested in that because I think it's really
So,
good at the moment.
what's come in the news most recently isn't the use of kind of like AI in the tech, but it's AI replacing jobs. And so essentially, and I could have this like a little bit wrong, but for the most part, they're looking at like an AI first model where if there's a gap, they're going to look to to fill it with AI first rather than a
Oh, I
human.
see. Oh,
And
I
then
see.
also people looking to like in their kind of like 6 monthly or annual reviews, like they're probably going to have to really be able to like justify their existence and their salary against AI, which obviously might be more cost effective than them in their current role. So I think they're taking a very hard line on AI being like making up as much of the workforce as possible, and you better know your numbers essentially.
Well, yeah, I can imagine that because even now, within the field of journalism and what have you, I'm seeing that people are having to really work hard to get the jobs, like the content jobs and things like that, because
Mm,
AI has been so well used. And actually, what it's done and what people I know have been doing is retraining themselves on certain other skills that they can use, like
mm,
strategy and things like that, which aren't necessarily always foolproof with AI. We know it's not foolproof anyway. So people
mm,
are countering it a little bit. And obviously, what you're talking about is jobs where there is an administration, tech, and any kind of digital application. But of course,
mm,
you look at industries like the construction industry, let's say, and I know from again just having a little read around skills in the trades and things like that are on the decline because young people aren't going into apprenticeships and things like that anymore. So I presume those are the other areas that are going to see problems. If you know what I mean, it's
mm.
it's kind of counterbalanced with more practical industries which are needing people to do practical jobs, but they're all off doing AI training and what have you.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that
hundred
seems to
percent.
be a bit of a discombobulation and an unbalance in that kind of thing, perhaps.
Yeah, I think the question is like what can't AI do, but then also prefacing that with like what can't AI do yet. I think there's always going to be obviously like a role for people, or I hope, unless some of the post-apocalyptic shows come true. But I think there's always going to be a role for people, but it's about figuring out like, okay, what do I index for as a person that I think is like more future-proof than kind of like what I'm doing currently. And also being able to like prove your worth, because AI definitely, at least at now, it's got a ceiling of like what it
Hmm.
can do,
Yeah,
but maybe senior leaders don't understand that ceiling, and they're like, well, we don't need a copywriter because AI can write that. But actually, there's a ceiling of like how creative or how current AI can probably be in
yeah.
terms of like churning out actually things that people want to read and people will actually engage with. So it's about making sure that people can negotiate and influence, which I kind of touched on before, and have people understand that actually no, like what I'm doing here actually matters. And yes, it could be replaced by AI, but like at what cost in terms of loss of engagement or just that human touch, I suppose.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I think we're treading a sort of fine line at the moment, aren't we? And again, that everything with the skills argument tends to be overshadowed by digital literacy and all that kind of thing. Within your workplace then, what kind of delivery have you got? What sort of courses are you organising? What kind of training are people having? What is the I know it's industry specific as well, but is there a type or is there a shift in anything that you've noticed?
Yeah, I mean, I think like my biggest thing is like my preference and my bias is kind of like person to person, kind of in person or virtual, if it needs to be. I think there is a place for like the digital stuff, but I just don't personally. I haven't seen like I don't know. I've never heard someone go, "Oh, mate, that e-learning was amazing," or like and sometimes it can do a job, and sometimes it can fill a gap. And obviously it's like a lot more scalable than like doing in-person sessions, and obviously it's like repeatable, and it's people can refer back to it. There's lots of advantages to it, but I think you can't just rely on being a course provider in L&D and just like you being a facilitator of a course catalog of kind of like outsourced material, because that's not really where behavior change comes from. That's not like, yes, you can tick boxes. Yes, you can say, oh, I've had 50 people take this course. That doesn't actually mean. I think there's definitely a delta between kind of the course taught and the person learned, and I think a lot of L&D can be stuck maybe a little bit more in like the 1980s with kind of 2020 technology, but like with in terms of its attitudes, towards like how do we deliver courses and what a culture of learning looks like.
Well, I've been writing about this quite a lot recently, and one of the things that sort of popped up in the course of some of the articles and what have you in the research was how the role of L&D itself, the L&D professionals that are delivering stuff and organising stuff and kind of getting this culture of learning within workplaces, which is another buzzword, isn't it? Culture of learning. But what I was reading was or people have been saying is that L&D are going to be curators of content, learning content, rather than sort of delivering stuff. Is going to be more in the flow, learning in the flow of work and that kind of thing. Do you think it's going that way? I mean, I know there's always going to be a need for certain types of skills learning. I'm just interested because that's what I've heard on the grapevine.
Yeah, I think the real value is probably more in like designing ecosystems,
Okay.
where it's not a zero sum game. It's not one or the other. And so I think tech and e-learning. I mean, e-learning's probably come a long way in the last 5, 10, 15 years anyway. And so it's probably only going to get better. And I'm probably going to be eating my words when we've got e-learning that's really, really good and and does exactly what we need it to. But it's more about, I guess, stepping away from. I think you become too transactional when you describe yourself as a content provider or curator. Because again, at some point, AI can probably do that. But if you are a capability architect, or if you're building like an ecosystem, that is where I guess like the magic happens. Where like if we talk about, I guess, like a culture of learning, like the way I envisage it is that like the way that maybe some traditional or maybe broken L&D works is kind of like giving like vegetables to like a toddler, where it's just like you'll give it to them and they might chew and they might pretend to swallow, but they kind of spit it out, if that makes sense. And that's kind of like giving them that content, and you kind of go to your significant other and you're like, oh, look, they ate it. They ate the piece of broccoli, or they learned that course, but actually they've spat out half of it because they didn't like the format that it came in. It didn't do anything for them. And so if you want to create a culture of learning, it's probably more akin to, and again, maybe the toddler metaphor is going out the window a little bit, but like opening up the pantry and letting them rummage around inside and find what they like. And also maybe like adding a little bit of MSG to that broccoli. I'm not giving parenting tips here. I'm not a parent myself, but what I would say is that you need to make it palatable and you need to make it like fit them, if that makes sense, and not tell them what they need, but kind of let them explore themselves. Because they might find some ingredients. Let's continue the metaphor. They might find some ingredients that like you didn't know existed that were at the back of the cupboard that actually suits them really well. So I think empowering them to like have a look around and find what they need, and then also showing them what good looks like in terms of content and content delivery, so they don't have like a sour taste when it comes to learning and like courses and e-learning, whatever it might be. That's going to go a whole lot longer or a whole lot further than just kind of being a curator of courses that might be subpar.
Well, on the food analogy and parenting analogy, if that's the case, then what about those fussy children? Do you not just give them what they need and tell them to eat it? Because can you satisfy the demands of everybody in the workforce, or does that get a little bit messy? Because if let's just say health and safety training, everybody's got to do it.
Yeah.
It's never going to be massively exciting. It is what it is. Some things, you're not going to make them all singing or dancing, are you? You've got to kind of get people trained in what they need to be trained. I know these are like the basics. So I suppose the job of the L&D manager, therefore, is to, at times, make sure that you're delivering what it is they need, and other times to allow perhaps for richer learning experiences. And I guess that would be more connected to the skills side of things. If you know that people have to learn. I know like VR is quite big now, isn't it? There's lots of VR in learning and kind of creating scenarios and things like that, which seems to be a new world of learning for people. So things like that, they're always going to be perhaps more fun for people, aren't they? That kind of learning, as opposed to the boring kind of stuff. So as an L&D manager, that's what I'm saying about the curation. You are going to have to make sure that you can pick the right course for the right person. And therefore, is that a sort of generational thing as well? I mean, you're going to have all these Gen Alphas coming in the next sort of 8 years. You're going to be having a completely different workforce. So what will therefore be the challenges? I've sort of gone off the parenting analogy now to another question.
No, that's fine. I think when you're talking about health and safety training and maybe like compliance training, I think you've always got to challenge yourself in that difference between I taught and they learned. So like, yes, you can be like force feeding them the stuff, but like, I guess the retention element is whether or not they spit it out or not, if that makes sense. And that probably is predicated on like whether or not they've had like an emotional response to whatever you've taught them. And you can like, if you actually try hard, you can probably evoke an emotional response to like whatever you're teaching. It just takes a bit more energy and it takes a bit like of creativity. And these are things that I think like, this is where like L&D people can have a competitive advantage over AI, because some of the things that you can come up with, like I've tried to use ChatGPT and AI to like come up with like unique training content to make stuff that like is boring, that's really boring, and make it more memorable or make it more fun. And it's pretty bland. It's pretty like mid-level, mid-tier stuff that it kind of
It didn't work.
Sorry, it just
It
didn't work.
didn't
And
work.
I'm not saying that it won't be able to do that in the future. Yeah, but I think don't discount like your own creativity and being able to create that. Like, for instance, I don't know, with health and safety training, like I used to make health and safety modules on fire extinguishers, I don't know, maybe 3-4 years ago. I'm the one making the modules. I'm the one like creating the quizzes, and I couldn't tell you which color corresponds with which fire extinguisher because I don't have an emotional response to that. Like,
Right.
so, so I'm the one creating the content, and I don't remember the difference between the different fire extinguishers. And that memory of mine probably slipped maybe like a couple of weeks after I created the module and like created all the tests and stuff. But if I had had some sort of, and again, I was lazy back then, and I'm getting better now, but I probably didn't create anything that evoked any sort of emotion in someone in terms of remembering what color is for what fire. If it's like a oil fire, use this color fire extinguisher. It's got the CO2 or whatever it is. I can't remember, which is the point of this. But that doesn't mean that it's not possible to make things memorable and make things like engaging for people, so they don't hate doing it.
Well, I think with the skills that we're talking about that people are more likely to need as well, basics aside, and AI and what have you. One of the things that I've seen quite a lot, and this comes from an educational point of view as well, is the lack of analytical or critical thinking and that kind of skill. Is that something that you've seen happening within the workplace, or there's a lack of that? Because obviously, when you're at university, you learn to look at things in a critical way and apply things through a different lens. And I think from, again, what I've been reading about, those are the skills, some of the so-called soft skills, the communicative skills, those kinds of things are falling by the wayside as we sort of steam ahead with a lot of this digital literacy and what have you. What can L&D do about that? What kind of restrictions or support or anything can be put in place to make sure that people are still using those and we don't let digital technology take over everything?
Yeah. And I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges that's going to occur. And I think we've been probably like pretty lucky in the last couple of years that it hasn't happened faster. But in terms of just like that misinformation and like, making critical business decisions based off a deep fake or based off, fabricated information or whatever it might be. So there's definitely a huge piece probably for senior leaders on that, like how to actually like verify information. And again, like it might be easy enough now and you might be able to skate through now, but like this stuff's only going to get more convincing or more
Yeah.
nefarious and like more comprehensive, that it's only a matter of time. So yeah, understanding that and having a fluency in it. And then, yeah, definitely I think the free market will always have a way of like kind of like auto correcting these things. But I think right now we're probably verging on a time when people are maybe like a lot more lazy and passive about what they're consuming, and whether or not like how valid it is and how reputable it is. Interestingly enough, though, I went to a charity shop and I saw a really awesome looking book, and I believe it's called like 1421, the year China discovered the New World. And I was like, this is cool. I'm just going to get real deep into some like quite niche nonfiction, see what happens, see if I can like create some analogies for my L&D stuff. And then I got about 10 pages into it and I was like, oh, something doesn't quite feel right about this. Like there seemed like some pretty bold claims about like China circumnavigating the world kind of before, before the rest of the world, and kind of what this person's kind of credentials were. And then I gave it a quick Google, and the book had been like debunked, in like 2005, when it kind of came out. But I had
Mm-hmm.
no idea. And so I feel like misinformation, I guess the idea of that is misinformation has always been out there, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, and like, I'm very grateful that I didn't actually, there was like a 500-page book. I'm really grateful I
You
didn't
didn't
really
read the
trudge
whole
through that
thing.
and realize it was fake. Well, not fake, but maybe like a tenuous links to
Yeah.
circumstantial evidence, shall we say. But so like I don't think misinformation or wrong information is like a novel thing, but I think now the amount of information that is out there and how we're consuming it, like it's so easy to say, oh, like don't trust everything that you see on the internet. But every single time I see something nuts, I'll show my fiance, I'll be like, oh, look at that. And then I'll see in the comments that it's completely fake or, it's not real. So
Yeah.
it's a strange one where like our critical faculties sometimes just like turn off and we just believe something
Well,
is
they've
funny
gone
because we see it.
mushy. Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
true. But I think you mentioned leadership there as well, and one of my questions was about the role of leadership in this crisis, because obviously, people can sit there and say, we need these things for our company to progress. L&D, we need to have people with these skills. We need you to be training them this way. We need this. We need this. What is it that leadership can do that would really help with this crisis? How are they able to direct things or budget for it? Like what could they be doing to really support the learning and development function and making sure that the organization is kind of future proofing its skills bank, I guess?
Yeah. So future proofing skills. I think uh it's about carving out the time. It's I think everywhere probably the biggest issue that any person in L&D faces, probably in any organization, is like people not feeling that they have enough time to sharpen the axe, and senior leaders not always buying into, or like them saying, yep, yep, you can go ahead, they can do that course or whatever it might be, but don't really empower those people to take the time that they need. So I think there's definitely a difference between someone in a senior position being like, yes, of course, like people can take time out to, develop their skills, but then actually like
Mm-hmm.
encouraging it and expecting it and holding people accountable it should be as much a part of the role to upskill yourself as it is to do your role, if that makes sense. Because people will just kind of stay stagnant doing the same thing, and it's hard, especially when you're like in a high growth company, or if you're in a sales function. Like that's not easy stuff to kind of sign off, and it's not easy stuff to do when you're in those roles.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like you are, what is it? There was a good quote that I saw the other day, was that it seems like the stone gets further away from the target when you put it in a slingshot. But because you're pulling back the stone, but it comes back
Right.
with a higher velocity. So sometimes you have to kind of step back a bit, or sometimes it has to seem like you're not getting closer to where you want to be, but that's just because you're kind of adding some oomph, you're adding some momentum, you're adding extra force to it. And I feel like some people can see that opportunity cost of an hour to do some training, or a day to do a course, or whatever it might be. So I think, senior leaders, I think it just needs to, in short, just make sure that they're not just saying, yep, it's okay, and kind of getting on with their day, and actually being strategic and showing people that it's expected of you to be doing these things. Because that's when people are going to do it, when they feel like it's a part of their role
Yeah.
and not just like a nice to have, or when they feel like there's going to be consequences to them not doing it. There needs to be some sort of like opportunity cost to not doing it as well as doing it.
I think that's where the discussion about curating a culture of learning is paramount, isn't it? Because if everybody is going, what do I need to do my job better? Not what do I need to not be replaced by AI, but what do I need to do to bring, my unique skills to my job? What is it that I do differently? And perhaps, requesting, can I have some training for this? And people be doing that throughout the organization. Oh, that person has just had some training in this. They want to learn these skills or what have you. How do you encourage that in a workplace? If I asked you to give me an elevator pitch on how
Mm.
to curate a learning culture, what are the pillars that are needed?
Oh, the pillars that are
Big
needed for a learning
question.
culture, an elevator pitch.
Yeah.
How would I pitch that? I think it's. Can you rephrase the question for me by any chance?
Okay, so we know that a culture of learning is like the cornerstone of a successful
Mm.
organization, right? If you needed to pitch this idea to the senior leadership team, saying, this is what we need to have in our organization, what would you
Mm.
say to them? How would you phrase that to explain that it's kind of key? It's a tough one.
It's a tough one. I think intrinsically they're going to know, and like it's not something that someone would necessarily disagree with. So I think
Okay.
that's where the difficulty comes from. It's like they all know in their mind, or in their heart, or whatever you want, whatever body part you want, that
Hey,
it's the right
yeah.
thing, and that people, like, there should be a culture of learning. I think it's putting it up there. I think my pitch would be, that they understand that a culture of learning is an important thing to have within the company. It's an important way of like retaining people, and like getting better and more innovative as a business, and creating more value. But it needs to be as much of a KPI as what's on the balance sheet. It needs to be as
Hmm.
much of a KPI as customer satisfaction, or whatever it might be. It needs to be. It needs to be measurable, and it needs to be. It needs to be. People need to be held accountable to it, if that makes sense. So, like, I think there's no problem in getting people to buy in that a culture of learning is important, or what should be there. The problem is the infrastructure that surrounds it, and the attitude that comes to it, where they think it's potentially might come overnight, or it might come just with kind of like a kind of a limp effort. It needs to be baked in, just like operational success is baked in, or just like how customer success is baked in.
Yeah, so really part of the fabric of the organization in that respect. We're nearly done. I'm going to wrap up, but I just wanted to say there was one thing. I was recently talking with the people from Canva, and they have this really cool skills pool, I guess, where anybody that's applied for a job with them, and they make it through to a certain round within their organization, get a lifetime Canva Pro membership, which is really great and a great, incentive. But they also join the little skills pool. And then if other jobs come up that they may be suitable for, they have this ready-made group of really engaged, switched on, job seekers who are applicants, candidates for the job, ready to go. And I think, gosh, what a really smart way of recruiting and, addressing the skills gap. So I just was very interested by that. And I think that model might be something we might end up seeing more of. Do you think so? Potentially, that kind of approach?
Yeah, I mean, I think employer brand is everything. And, if someone has a bad experience interviewing and applying for your roles, they're probably going to tell other people, it's
Yeah.
about, it's like you got to almost just treat candidates like their customers, if that makes sense. So a bad experience is going to be like magnified in terms of like how many people they tell, and like good experiences, like nothing's going to come bad of like just giving them a good experience and replying, even if it's an automated reply that they didn't get the role. That kind of that circling back is never going to go astray. And I think if you can create I guess almost like a fan club of like, if you can
Yeah.
get someone and have a good score. So if someone who didn't get the job gives you a high kind of NPS rating, like that's where the magic happens, because then you're building almost like a fan club of like, like if you're not treating people right, I guess there's the kind of the neutral response, and then there's like the negative, which obviously you don't want. And I think a lot of people might try and just go for neutral, like nothing ever happened. And Canva's going in that other direction of
Oh, the
like,
way. Yeah.
let's create positive
Yeah.
feelings, positive responses. Because again, like there's so many people who like just miss out, who would be perfect in 6 months' time or in a year's time. And if you can keep those people engaged, that reduces like the time it takes to find people drastically. Because again, like if they're getting to a certain point, then they've already shown like they've got the skills, and it might just be the wrong timing, or it might be the wrong like
Yeah.
role fit. So yeah,
Exactly.
I absolutely love that they're just kind of creating a little fan club, and they're not burning any bridges, and
Yeah.
they're keeping people warm.
Well, I think that it's definitely a really smart move, and I think that branding is ever like, I mean, Octopus and the little octopus. I mean, I think you guys do a really good job with branding. I think it helps, doesn't it? It keeps things friendly, keeps things nice, and I just think that this whole branding thing is going to be a really big part as we move forward of how people see it. It's sort of in keeping with how we consume things, consume technology, consume our media and everything. So that's definitely something I see happening more. And I think in L&D, there's definitely room for innovation. And if there's one thing I've learned from working in L&D for a long time, is that people who are L&D professionals are innovative. They have got ideas, and I hope to see lots of this kind of thing. So is there, just to round off, is there anything exciting going on within your own workplace, within learning, that you've got bubbling away, or any kind of tips or advice that you might like to impart before we finish today?
I do have a project going at the moment. We're launching a platform called Go Figure, which is super exciting. So essentially, they're a skills marketplace, and the end result is hopefully going to be able to. There's lots of different aspects to it, and this isn't a marketing pitch, but what it's going to enable us to do is create a bit of a heat map of kind of where our skills are, what skills people desire, and helping people connect with each other, with resources, with learning, with coaches, to be able to like enhance and increase their skills, whether it be like projects that are happening, going on, and just a nice centralized place for people to just go into the pantry like a toddler, if that makes sense, and
Yeah,
see
yeah.
what's out there, and have opportunities curated for them, whether it be projects or job roles or secondments or training. And so that's still in the infancy stage at the moment of kind of rolling that out, but it's just another way that I guess like technology and AI is kind of helping us create that culture of learning that we're looking for.
Oh, that sounds brilliant. What a great idea. You see, you're going to be innovating. That's what we like to hear, because I think it gives people ideas. And as long as we're getting those ideas and moving things forward, progressing, then, hopefully the rest will follow. I think
Yeah,
that's the idea. Chris, thank you so much for your time today. We've had a really great discussion, and I think there's plenty more to talk about. So it'd be great to get you back at another time, just to continue the conversation. And in the meantime, we'll keep watching and see what happens with your heat mapping skills
yeah.
journey. So thank you very much, Chris. Everybody else, thank you for listening today, and we'll be back again with another episode next month. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks, Verity.